just responding to claims and assertions on the internet with waptek. French virologist Luc Antoine Montagnier, who is a Nobel laureate who was part of the group that figured out that AIDS is caused by the HIV virus, human immunity, HIV. Since that time, and even before that time, he has made mistakes, and I'm putting that in quotes, about many things. He has supported anti-vaxxers, homeopathy. He said DNA emits electromagnetic waves when it doesn't, in the way he's talking about. And there's a specific claim he made about that. But let's talk about what he's known for recently, because people ignore all this other crap that they have to then somehow hand wave away. He said COVID-19 was man-made in a lab that was attempting to create an AIDS vaccine when it has nothing to do with it. But the claim was based on him finding out of the HIV, out of the COVID-19, DNA chain, a segment that was similar to a segment inside of HIV/AIDS. But the presumption here is because we discovered COVID-19 after HIV, and he specifically is one of the people who figured out HIV, that it had to come from that. But the thing is, every head cold and other coronavirus you have has the same DNA chain. Exactly the same one. In fact, it's more likely that COVID-19 is just part of all of the other coronaviruses that could have helped cause HIV in the first place. Ordinary viruses do mix together when they enter the same host and infect a person at the same time. Now, anti-vaxxers, for some bizarre reason, have decided that we can't have viruses be working the way we know they work and can show even in a test tube, because it ought to not work because they're not really living material. Except that they just keep doing what they do. We treat them as a disease. That's not that they're living, it's just that they cause a disease. They don't have to be a living thing to cause a disease or be communicable. That isn't necessary. But anyway, this is the equivalent to saying that since a brand new Bugatti Veyron is using aluminum in it, that it's identical to the aluminum peak on top of a memorial in Washington, D.C. that was made out of aluminum 100 years ago or something, or more than that. That's not the same thing. Or more accurately, it's literally saying it is exactly the same thing as a building. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, for him to say this whole family of coronaviruses, which all of them have the same DNA chain or something very similar to it, he wasn't being very precise when he said these things. It would have to be lab-made, then this is obviously nonsensical, since all of those originated, that particular DNA code, over 10,000 years ago, before labs existed. It's more likely that the coronavirus had an effect on HIV because there were coronaviruses before HIV. HIV happened later. Coronaviruses happened earlier and have been around for at least 10,000 years or longer. And that hunk of DNA code has been found to have existed for more than 10,000 years, probably. What came first? This single DNA chain, it's equivalent to a bolt. Yes, the same bolt can be used for an airplane or a car. It doesn't mean that a car is an airplane. This is the equivalent assertion. Now, this isn't very hard to decode because you can look up what he was talking about, find that protein chain or DNA chain, depending on what he wants to call it, and look it up in the text version of the DNA chain for SARS, the original SARS virus, for head colds, for the copy of the DNA that we were able to get a hold of for the original swine flu, and even further back the Spanish flu. These are coronaviruses. They happen to include similar protein chains. He found a connection between them from, well, it wouldn't have just been COVID-19, it would have been all the others. That's dead ass. That's the end of the video. And this was pointed out to him. And because he's a Nobel laureate, He just ignored people and said, you don't get the big picture. And it's like, but that chain is in the other coronaviruses that came before HIV and some of them after, including, yes, the swine flu. This is a legitimate question, answer it, and he wouldn't answer it. He got angry at people questioning him because he's not used to it and decided to go move to China for a while to avoid anybody questioning him. He won a Nobel Peace Prize with someone else, and it went to his head. What else has he said? Well, he did a paper where he claimed water structures can mimic or copy molecules. And this would be useful for detecting viral infections somehow. And a diluted DNA from a pathogenic bacteria or viral species is able to emit a specific radio wave associated with nanostructures in the solution that might be able to recreate the pathogen from water. Because literally, if you divide it down enough, the water will copy the virus because the water molecules are attaching to complex hydrocarbons, and then they break loose, and because they've created a mirror of it, they are now the same as the hydrocarbons, but they're just water molecules. It's water. It doesn't suddenly start copying proteins when you put it in there by being a carrier of data. It doesn't create a spiritual impression of things. And yeah, this is homeopathy. Anyway, next. January 2009, he submitted a paper on the 3rd of the month. It was revised on the 5th and accepted on the 6th of January 2009 very rapidly. And it wasn't peer-reviewed before being accepted and wasn't submitted to peer review before publication while he was chairman of the editorial board for this brand new journal. He submitted a paper that he would review himself. And afterwards, people reviewed it without asking him, and he just sort of ignored it because, again, he ran off to China. And they couldn't replicate the results or even prove that any of it worked. They made a good attempt at it. Because and unfortunately, this is something a lot of people do when they review this subjects. Most of them are bloggers. Well, if this is true, it upends science as we know it. At that point, I want you to admit you were wrong, and I want you to never say anything again because you're literally repeating. The guy who said that, if you're curious, will totally upend science, and we've got to start over with physics, and up us down, and gray aliens and frogs, gay ones. Does that sound like a person you want to trust with your pregnancy results? Someone who doesn't critically analyze what the fuck he's being told by somebody who doesn't want anybody reviewing it. And your idea of reviewing this was to say the same thing that particular blogger has said hundreds of times. This will upend the apple cart. And your score so far is literally 0 correct for several hundred different subjects. No, it never upends the apple cart, because if anybody says this is going to change the paradigm or any of that other shit, what that means is that someone is saying something so completely counter to what we've been able to test and prove in reality that they would have to come up with some weird special case, which, okay, that can happen. Or they're just being contrarians, or they haven't studied anything. The guy got a Nobel Peace Prize in one thing. He had one thing he got right. And after that, he embraced all sorts of things because people would rub his ego just right direction and just the right rhythm, and not listen when someone pointed out, you just found out that every coronavirus on the planet has this. You just discovered this? You're the HIV expert. That's good. But if you study literally the flu every year, which isn't as, superstarish and isn't going to get you a Nobel Peace Prize, even though you might even save more lives, you'd know that that DNA chain is in many forms of the flu or seasonal flu. And it's in head colds, and it's in literally the Spanish flu and that sort of thing. Now, I can't prove any of this. He can't either, because he stopped communicating it at some point. He got mad that people told him he made a simple mistake and could not fucking get over it. That's a first-year student's mistake, not admitting you made one. This is an easy one. What he found out is that one of the little worker bot type mechanisms or DNA chains or hunks of programming that makes head colds and the flu work the way they do, just like it does in COVID-19, also is in AIDS. He essentially just discovered coronaviruses have some similarities, all of them. Head colds have been around a long time. It's not a lab invention. It can't be because it literally contains this because that connection he found it didn't actually make the virus any different than any of the other coronaviruses. It's one of the many similarities. That's why we know it's a coronavirus, besides its appearance, which is the corona effect of those little bumps on the outside, the little stalks. That's it. That's dead ass what he did. He may have never studied coronaviruses ever. This is a very, very strange thing for a person to come up with as a way to show people he's somehow upsetting the apple cart or challenging the paradigm or some other blasted thing, facilitating your mojo. I don't get it. Anyway, he was very brilliant at one time and probably still is. But now he seems to be obsessed with trying to push this point. And every chance he gets, he wants to be in the news. So he decided that COVID-19 has to be created in a lab. He got in a patent dispute at one point or something. Isn't that a meme about Bill Gates? I'm sure that wasn't really a patent dispute. Links below in the description. You'll come up on Wikipedia. It's a thumbnail bullshit sketch, but it has most of the data in it. The other links will be to science.thewire.in and science.thewire.in, another entirely different thing. Or is it? No, it isn't. It's the same one. Oh, it's a double posting. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And no, he didn't prove that coronavirus was made in a lab, and he didn't prove that it's related to AIDS in any way. He just proved it's a virus because they're all viruses that we're talking about. They might all have the same characteristics of being a virus. They might have some components that are identical. That might actually happen.